connectivity to be able to go online and do a blog or read a blog on a computer. If one gets down to Ghana, all those things I showed you with blogs and web pages and interactive graphics and downloadable videos and Twitter, 0.9% in December 2008 when the election was held. So in terms of internet connectivity, in terms of millions of users, we have got a great deal and a long way to go. But the cell phone changes everything. You will see that slowly Africans are getting more and more connected across the country. And in very, very quick time, we are going there. Look at 2007, 2008, 2009 already, almost 450 million. Prices are dropping. Speeds are getting faster. The screens are getting bigger. I cannot imagine myself what it must be like to go onto the internet for the first time in your life on this tiny little screen. I mean, it is hard enough on a big screen to figure out the internet. If you can all remember the first time you went, or figure out email, or figure out Facebook or Twitter. But people are doing it. They're doing it because they have no other way to access. And more people, as I say, in South Africa, we now have about 9 million people accessing the internet each day on their phones, as opposed to only about 4.5 million accessing it on a landline. Which is usually a faster connection. And what's also happening is that we have gone from a situation where you'll see these very narrow connections to Africa. Look at the thickness of the pipes. This is the pipes in inverted commas, the fiber optic cables that connect the world. And you'll see in Africa that they are very thin. But right this year, we are getting a new cable, and next year, another new cable. So if you just look at how, all of a sudden, African internet connectivity speed, and I had to check this figure, is not going up by 4 times more. It's not going up by 40 times more, but by 400 times more. Speed, capacity, and bandwidth. 400 times more. This is, of course, just referring to Africa's connection to the world, but still, a lot of the internet email is routed through the rest of the world, the United States in particular. And we have to do a lot of work inside Africa. I haven't got a map to show you how weak and thin those lines are. So it's no use having a very fast T1 line to the United States if your last mile connection is too slow. So the work needs to be done then. So just in summary and in conclusion, I want to draw out 3 brief points. There's very little, sorry, you can't see that too well, so I will just tell you what it says. As I said, advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic, but if I could do some magic, then things would be better. But there's very little media density in Africa. This is well known in terms of how much media there is in any of the medias, TV, radio, or print. There's also very little that is happening in many African countries to create greater freedom. This was the subject of your conference last year, to create greater media freedom. And people really are using, increasingly, cell phones, internet, SMS, blogging, Twitter, as a way around state ownership and around censorship. And it's a very, very powerful medium. Zimbabwe is among the most repressive countries in Africa, but you can't stop millions of people with cell phones getting the truth out with SMS. And increasingly, when Zimbabwe gets more connected, with SMS connectivity. Twitter's breaking out all over Africa, and social networks in particular. At my university, Rhodes University, we have about 1,000 Zimbabwean students. Almost 1/5 of our student population is from Zimbabwe. And all of these students keep in touch from Facebook in particular, Zimbabwean students, and many students from other countries in Africa. Blogging is taking out everywhere. Social networks are starting to play much more of a role. But the 3 kind of shifts that I want to identify in my last minute is the shift that I think is so significant. And that is the shift away from identity-based politics to issue-based politics. Now, this is a very problematic term. But really, what one is getting to and what one's trying to to what extent are people voting on what is genuinely in their own self-interest and to what extent are they voting along a tribal, ethnic, racial affiliation. And that is as true in America, where people are voting Republican because their grandparents voted Republican and their parents, and you brought up in a particular culture, and your culture tells you, you are a Catholic, you must therefore vote for this party. Or, you are a gun owner, therefore you must vote for the Republicans, or something like that. Rather than saying, what are the issues that are important in my life? And what we've seen in Africa now is the extension of a small group of people. In America, they would call them swing voters, who are genuinely prepared to listen to the arguments, to make up their minds. The so-called undecideds have moved from being a tiny little piece in the middle in most countries in Africa and elsewhere in the world, to being more and more important in the middle. In that Ghana election, there were many people who voted for John Atta Mills that had never voted for his party before. He'd been organizing, using media, going door to door, holding street parties, holding little face-to-face things for 2 years before the election. And people, instead of voting on any kind of ethnic affiliation, there's that small group who sort of switch. And that's what happened with Obama as well. Those swing voters that broke for Reagan and broke for Bush, both the older and the younger Bush, many of them broke for Obama. And the same takes place in Ghana, the same is taking place in many other African countries. There's also this incredible ability of this technology to broaden the public space because of the things that Nancy was talking about, the speed and the power and the connectivity. You can put so much more out there. If you are interested in knowing what a candidate really thinks about a particular issue, it's not a big deal to find it out anymore, even in Africa. SMS, candidate's name, what the issue is, let's say on gender equality, and you will get a link to a URL and you can go and read all about it. So everyone's learning from the way the Obama. And then finally, new levels of connectivity, lower costs, increasing sophistication of phones. I predict, and I believe this to be true here as well as in Africa, that all phones will be smartphones within a very, very quick space of time. Not 10 years or 15 years. I don't think you will find a phone in Africa in 2015, which is the Millennium Development Goal deadline, that is not connected to the internet. Because already, we've seen in South Africa and many other countries, it just is stepping up. Only about 20% of phones in Africa now can connect to the internet, but I suspect I predict that will be close to 100% in just 6 or 7 years. So as that is happening, and as all phones become smartphones, broadband is coming, connectivity is increasing, we've seen a situation where the nature of political participation and the ability of people to have their voices heard and participate is changing, and changing for the better. And I certainly think that is a reason, certainly myself and I think many of my colleagues here who are from Africa, for us to be very optimistic about the ability of ordinary people to shape both the institutions of democracy and the ultimate democratic act, the act of voting and changing governments more powerfully themselves. Thank you very much indeed.